There's links you next, and we can argue about things.
Yes.
Ryan, come gather. Grab a chair, Tolkien Society.
No, those the groundlings.
Where's our society members? They were going to come.
Groundlings?
Hello, Michael. We're gathering around. Yep, grab a chair.
So is this live streaming?
Yes, it's, well, so on a different camera, it's streaming live, kind of watching from behind the audience.
Is it on the Tolkien Moot channel?
Yeah, on the Tolkien Moot channel, yeah. User Tolkien Moot.
I'm going to try something new.
Okay. Because that always goes smoothly.
We try to advertise in our live stream to go over to the Tolkien side.
Yeah.
I can inject stuff into my websites.
Okay.
Quickly.
Okay, good.
So I'm going to put the live stream on top of the
Cool.
picture.
Nice.
Let's see what it looks like.
Yes, any Tolkien Society member go and scoot on over.
If he wants to.
Yeah, it's a challenge by choice.
No big deal. It's fine.
So let me verify that that stream is working correctly.
Wow.
If you want, I can monitor it back here.
Yes. Okay. So we're running live on znight.org, Nowhere website. I'm going to have a little fun with this while we talk.
Is the audio working okay too? On that stream?
It sounds just slightly buzzy, but otherwise fine.
Watch out, Hog. He's going to put Snapchat buttons on you.
And the buzz might be from the air conditioner, actually.
Yeah, it probably is the AC.
It's a killer rabbit.
If it's not too bad. Because turning off the AC, yeah.
Yeah, it's like no time.
The saga.
So a YouTube stream is,
I got this. That's
I know, it's youtube.com/user/Tolkien. Because the one without user, Google won't let me, it's all screwed up.
Okay, so
youtube.com/user/Tolkien.
Go check
Yes, and Chris Cooper, anybody else come?
I don't know.
Yeah, I never heard back.
Did the notes get posted?
Yeah, I don't know, but the meeting, so
We did tell.
there are like 6 people who RSVP'd saying they'd be here just for the moot, just for the Tolkien Society. But
Well, we are 4 minutes away, 3 minutes away, so
okay,
maybe let's go. So
I show one.
we want to have some.
If we got a word,
Thanks to the door.
What's that?
just for a thank you.
Yeah.
So my wife just moved
Here we go.
Yes.
More people. Welcome.
Hey, I was thinking.
Welcome. Tolkien Society folks, come front and center.
Grab a chair. Be on camera.
You can be
Or
there
you
or
can
be up here, however you wish, but front row, one way or the other.
Yes.
And these are from the Spokane Arena, these chairs. So. Okay. Where's Drake?
Drake is upstairs.
Okay. I guess he's manning the door. All right. Well, let's go ahead and we'll call the meeting to order. It's 1 o'clock, so that's fine. Yes. Yes, indeed. And we are streaming live on our Tolkien Moot YouTube channel, on that camera back there. And then meanwhile, through Skype, we have Michael Martinez here, published Tolkien author and essayist, and also an SEO wizard and such, search engine optimization and such. That's his day job. We have a number of Michael's books here. I don't have his ebook up because it's an ebook, but and then of course we got Tolkien and such. But we have Parma Endorion, Visualizing Middle Earth, Understanding Middle Earth, and then it's Mindfaring in Middle Earth. Is your ebook?
Mindfaring
through Middle Earth. Okay. And
available for Kindle.
okay. Yeah, which I'm pretty sure I have on my. Just to find words lying around. So.
I have it on Kindle, Michael. It's a good book.
So this year's theme for Tolkien Moot. So first of all, the Ea Tolkien Society is an official Smial of the UK Tolkien Society. We've been running since. I know, Smial. Yeah, Smile sounds confusing. Many years, and this is the 13th annual Tolkien Moot, which is our annual convention, which includes lots of gaming as well as literary, scholarly discussion. We have in recent years started to pick themes, and this year's theme was Mordor. So we get to discuss all things related to where the shadows lie. Yes, happy topics. And those of you playing the role-playing game sessions are going straight into Mordor for your adventure. So,
What could possibly go wrong?
yes. So I'm Hawk Robinson. I'm founder of the Ea Tolkien Society, and this is.
I'm Richard. I'm Brian. And I'm the secretary.
And other Tolkien Society members, it's up to you if you want to say hello or not. But you can say hello to Michael. He can see. He's got a camera here, so he can see the audience.
Hi, Michael. Hi.
And if you want to go ahead and read the
Sure.
notes from last month.
Absolutely. The notes for the June meeting of the Ea Tolkien Society of the Inland Northwest. And we were back at Hawk's home after May. He was not able to be part of the meeting, and so it was good to be all back together. We had Hawk, Richard, Chris, Wesley, Stephanie, and Brian attending. Corey sent apologies that he was ill. And we talked about some administrivia. And then also we talked about the upcoming Tolkien Moot, that we would be having our meeting in the midst of Tolkien Moot, the annual tabletop role-playing convention based on adventures within Middle-earth in the spirit of Tolkien's epic story. The Society will meet at 1 p.m. as usual, but those interested in the full RPG adventure should look at more info at the website and how they can RSVP, etc. Third, we had a discussion of Amazon's purchase of Whole Foods. There was a relevant connection. We talked about how as you have more and more situations like this, Amazon, in one sense, it's great because you can find things more easily. So it's easier to acquire books, for example, on Middle-earth. I mean, you could get Kindle, like Michael was just mentioning. There's lots of platforms, and it's great. On the other hand, it's also causing some rare book dealers online, such as A-Books and other ones, to have a harder time and sometimes go out of business. So it's kind of a blessing and a curse. Then we segue to H.G. Wells and his role-playing game, Little Wars, which dates to about...
Not a war game, not role-playing game. 1913.
Sorry. War game.
Predecessor to
About what time?
1913.
1913. Right, because they weren't actually taking on a character, they were
Doing our
Military
best.
forces.
military, right. So,
With actual working spring-loaded cannons
Right.
and stuff.
okay. So he set the stage for later RPG wargaming. Industrialization led to greater leisure time and therefore made RPGs possible. Hawk gave a little history of role-playing evolution. And then follow-up question for July, which we have not, I haven't done the research on this, so if anybody knows, did J.R.R. Tolkien and H.G. Wells ever meet?
Oh, right, yeah.
Everybody,
Did anybody get a chance to check that out from last month?
look it up on Google.
Michael,
if
do
you
you
want.
happen to know?
H.G. Wells?
You're muted. Unmute.
Sign language at least.
I didn't hear you. There you go.
I don't think they ever met.
Yeah, okay, we couldn't find any.
H.G. Wells was an American, so it's even less likely, right?
Right, but I think I did do a little research, and I think I saw that he may have read some of, because they read the sci-fi stuff. But that's about as far as.
Extra credit to anybody who
Yeah.
can find within 6 degrees
50
of
extra
separation
experience
between H.G. Wells, because I'm sure he knew people who knew people who knew Tolkien.
and so on.
And so on and so on. And then I read the May 2017 notes for our Smial. Hawk read Tolkien Letter 140 and the discussion points from that letter of J.R.R. Tolkien. was that the names of the 3 volumes of the Lord of the Rings, now known as the Fellowship of the Ring, the Two Towers, and the Return of the King, he preferred the War of the Ring as the title of the last volume to not give away the Return of the King prematurely. And then we talked about the title, The Two Towers. Tolkien accepted this, but he seems to have intended ambiguity and mystery about which towers these are. In his letter, he suggests possible pairs, but he doesn't say, well, these are the 2 I was talking about. So he deliberately leaves it up to guessing. And we compared this with George R.R. Martin and fans knowing where the story's going. Our group did some checking to see when in the text did Tolkien really give away Aragorn's true identity as the heir of Isildur. It's in the Council of Elrond, but it does not state Aragorn's intent to return and rule as Isildur's heir, because obviously his father and his grandfather were also Isildur's heir, but his intent to actually take up the kingship is not until his sword is remade and he takes up Isildur's authority in the Paths of the Dead. Michael, did you want to make any comment on that? That this is what we thought when we met last month. Anything to add to that as far as when Aragorn made it clear that he was returning to rule?
Muted.
I think he did it in steps.
Right.
I don't think he was trying to assert his authority from the start. I think he was kind of playing it by ear, as it were, waiting to see when the appropriate time would be to declare himself openly. Because, at the onset of the quest, Gondor was still being ruled by the stewards. And there was that question of how do you transfer authority from the stewards back to the king. There was a lot that Aragorn would have to accomplish. So
he really respected that, didn't he, Michael? I mean, he didn't want to just end up subverting that. He wanted it to be kind of a peaceful process of transfer.
Well, it had to be a lawful transfer. I mean, that was the whole point of Aragorn's moral right to rule, I guess. Which was he was restoring the ancient law, not setting aside all law or resetting the law. So I think when Arlen sent the banner to him, that kind of set things in motion unexpectedly for Aragorn. The timing was right. It gave him an opportunity to display the symbols of Elendil's house without, trying to rabble rounds, I guess you could say.
Like at the Battle of the Lenor Fields, is that what you're thinking? When they come up with the boats?
Yeah, but I mean, he wasn't going there to overthrow the power of the steward. He was going there to rescue the steward.
Right.
So it was kind of gradual. His declaration was kind of a declaration by accretion of acts.
And just for the audience, about how long was it for? I mean, the king. There hadn't been a king in Minas Tirith for centuries, right?
Over 1,000 years.
Right.
I think the last one died in 2007, Third Age.
He went and challenged the Witch King in Minas Morgul.
Yeah.
Disappeared.
Yeah, that always ended.
But it's really amazing that
Over 1,000 years.
even Denethor would not sit on the throne, but sat in the steward's chair, right?
Yeah. So, a comparable situation would be like if England had not been ruled since 1066 by a king.
Wow.
William the Conqueror set himself up as the steward of England or whatever, and then all of his descendants and heirs had continued in that capacity, and people were still waiting for a direct descendant of, say, Alfred the Great or whoever to come back.
That'd be pretty awesome. Just saying, that'd be pretty epic.
Direct descendant of.
I don't know that they would pass off power that easily there.
Yeah. I guess I should point out that technically, Queen Elizabeth II is a descendant of Alfred, but I don't think, she's clearly not a direct descendant of Alfred. There have been some changes, but they've done a pretty good job of keeping the throne in the bloodline somehow.
Yeah, I think
It's passed up.
I think it was through so Harold, who was the last king of the Saxons. Wasn't it one of his? I think it was his daughter or a sister that was married the King of Scotland. So anyway, We chose to read selections from Christopher Tolkien's latest edited work of his father, Beren and Luthien, which came out in early June. We read parts of the preface, and then we read the overall synopsis of the story and notes on the Elder Days. And we also wanted to note on Dorthonion. Oh, I just lost my notes.
We're currently experiencing technical.
I hate this. Okay, sorry. Just one moment. Loading. Here I am. Loading. Accidentally clicked on the link. Note on Dorthonion. They mentioned it as part of Valyrian and the mountains of Dorthonion, and Christopher Lee sang Treebeard's Song of the Seasons, which is quite good. Mentions that, of course, that's in the time of the Hobbit and Lord of the Rings. Those lands are all beneath the waves, and then also related to Beren and Luthien, where a lot of their story really does take place in Valyrian and Angband. That it was inspired by J.R.R. Tolkien's wife Edith dancing in Yorkshire, and there's a really fantastic blog post by Michael Flowers, who is a local researcher, and he's identified the exact kind of flower that was growing, because in the poem, it's Beren discovers the elf maiden. Beren is a human warrior, discovers the elf maiden dancing, and so this was inspired by his wife at one point. So anyway, there's a great link on the notes for that. And then just a reminder to consider joining us for Tolkien Moot July 15th, which of course is right now. So any comments on Beren and Luthien from anybody? The publication?
How many of you, raise your hand if you've read the Silmarillion all the way through? Okay, that's 1, 2, 3, and myself. And, right, and Michael many times. Okay, raise your hand if you've at least tried to read the Silmarillion, whether you finished or not. Yeah. So how far did you get before you quit?
The song.
So the beginning.
It's like trying to read the Bible.
Right, well, it's Genesis, and then the begatting of all the
Actually,
days.
interesting note that the third edition of the Silmarillion has pulled the poetry part of the song part out of it.
Ugh. I've been composing slowly in a symphony, like matching, like the goal is while you're reading it, you can hear the symphony as he describes Melkor's brazen trumpets, out of tune and such. You will hear Melkor's brazen trumpets out of tune, at a moderate reading pace and such. And just slowly.
Melkor isn't evil, he's misunderstood.
Yeah, he's not Morgoth yet. But it's still a very unfinished symphony, but quite good.
Another failed artist takes over the world.
but I love the whole concept of the Song of Arda, and that music permeates everything, as a musician on the side.
I think what's really interesting is Christopher Tolkien says in the preface that there are really only a few stories in the Silmarillion that his father felt were like they were all important to him, but there's certain ones that were key to understanding, maybe, and so I know we talked about briefly. We read through. One of them is Beren and Luthien, and just that chapter alone by itself, if you don't read the whole Silmarillion, you should read that chapter because it's such an amazing epic.
And it's his love story to his wife too.
It is. But I mean, so Morgoth has 3 of the Silmaril jewels in his crown, the Iron Crown, and Beren takes one of them in order to go back to ask for Luthien's hand in marriage, and just really amazing. The other one, I believe, was the fall of Gondolin.
Okay. Yeah.
The interesting note about that jewel out of the crown, he was mortal. He succeeded, and there had been a lot of immortal elves that tried and failed horribly.
Yeah. How many of you know the contentious, difficult start between the romance of Tolkien and his wife and the resistance of the family? So the parallels of the rejection of Beren by the father. Yeah. It's just a lot. A
Also,
lot of parallels.
this also helps to explain a lot of the animosity between dwarves and elves, which
Mm.
is just only kind of mentioned in in passing, but it's not like some kind of racism as much as it is deep-seated historical grievances. Because, like with Lúthien's father Thingol, he actually, when this Silmaril is brought to him, he eventually has it included in this amazing jeweled necklace, and he hires dwarves to make this great craft, this wonderful thing, the Nauglamir, and it becomes really so desirable that the dwarves end up killing Thingol over it. So that's where a lot of this animosity comes from.
Since we're doing the moot, we'll be a little more specific on one topic. We love our normal monthly meetings are the third Saturday of each month, and we went ahead and adjusted a few years ago that Tolkien Moot was consistently the third Saturday of each month, so we didn't keep bumping our monthly meetings around and the convention timing around. Having that consistency, it makes it a lot easier for people to plan ahead, and that seems to have worked pretty well. I think we did that about 2-3 years ago, and I think it's been helpful for a lot of people. So this year's theme is Mordor, in the land of shadow, and
There's a common connection too, isn't there? Sauron is in both the Silmarillion
right.
and in
Oh yeah.
so.
Anatol.
Well, I was thinking specifically of Theron and Lúthien.
Sure.
Very nice.
And so we are this is
It
the
was
first.
a bump on the road.
Yeah. This is the first time where we have connected a previous year's adventure. So we've experimented over the years. This is our 13th year doing this. And initially I would write the adventure, and I was the only GM initially. And then we got more GMs and more tables. And I had this idea of, okay, I'll write the adventure and all the GMs will run the same adventure. It doesn't matter what system you use. And that way everybody could share their war stories, right? Like, well, what did you find? And what did you run into? And how'd you survive this? And so that created a little bit of connection. And then I think on our fourth moot, just because it's so much work to hurry and write a module, and usually I can't even really start out until classes get out, and so it's an insane, difficult time. And so I think on our fourth one, that's when we had John D. Ratliff and Michael Martinez in person talking about the history of The Hobbit, and also about Tolkien and role-playing games. And you can watch that on our YouTube channel if you want to check that out. But we let the game masters just run whatever they wanted. We still picked a theme, which I believe was dwarves. I don't know if you remember, Michael. Was it dwarves that year? I think it was.
Dave, I've slept twice since then.
You got to sleep? So I believe it was dwarves. And so every GM needed to pick an adventure that had dwarves as a central theme, but that was it. And they all did their own thing. And the feedback was mixed. And so I went back to writing the adventures, and then all the GMs played the same thing. Did that for a while, then got swamped, and so let the GMs do it again. And by then we had the questionnaires that people could give real feedback. And the main thing was that people felt less connected in the experience of this moot when you're all up in 5 completely different adventures. You can't really relate to the other storyline. It might be interesting, it might not, but it didn't feel like you were all in the same thing together. And so when we brought back the shared adventure, scores went up quite a bit, but people had a good time because they could maybe get some clues like, oh, what was behind that little cabinet that we didn't check out? What did we miss? Or, hey, we're about to come up to this tower. You guys already went through it. What should we know about? You know, trying to get the little what up and such. But you get to have that shared experience, even though you're in a different room with a different game master, with your own different group, with a different game system usually. But it's still the same storyline, and so you can see it from different perspectives. It's kind of the whole multiverse thing. It's like you're all trying the same story simultaneously from different splits. And so that we decided to keep, even though it's been very challenging. In recent years, my youngest son, Drake, who's an aspiring writer, has helped a lot with that. He really fills in the narrative parts. So I do the research on whatever the theme is. Just get all that research. It takes a while. And then some sort of scaffolding of a storyline and roughly what we want to see between session to session to session. Remember, Tolkien Moot used to be 3 days. You know, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and some people stayed till Monday. Some people showed up Thursday. But we compressed it down to one because A, it was getting expensive, B, it was killing me. Just the long hours. And a lot of people, but it was a trade-off because a lot of out-of-towners don't come here anymore because it's not worth 1 day, travel all the way here for 1 day. It was worth it for 3 days. So it's become a more local event with the 1 day thing. But this connected storyline we're keeping. Last year, the group made an oath to the NPC to try to get the NPC. The NPC was a witch and kept possessing other people's bodies to try to stay alive. Because she'd fallen in love with an elf, but who got captured by Sauron as necromancer no older. And the years were passing as she was trying to find a way to get him free. She was getting old, and she had used a disguise as a witch to get closer to the necromancer. Right, so her intentions were good intentions. She wanted to free the person she loved, and he wasn't a bad guy, but she kept having to make incremental compromises until finally, when the heroes come to the story, she's very corrupt, right? She has had to do some really bad things, including taking over other people's bodies and such. Of course, Tolkien always talks about free will and the lack of that, and the exertion of will over others as a clear difference between good and evil. And so she really crossed that line. And the group I was running last year, Brian was in it. You weren't there that year, right? Okay. Anyway, there were only certain criteria in which she could go ahead and possess somebody else. They had to be descended of Númenorian blood. I think that was the main thing. They had to be descended of Númenorian blood. And there was this baby, and so Tatagi, David, took the baby, and he was the only Númenorian in the group, and ran to Edoras, and now she couldn't jump bodies, basically. They didn't know that was the criteria. What's that?
I think it was your idea.
Yeah, CJ, yeah.
CJ had the great idea.
It was a great idea. It stopped her in her tracks. She couldn't keep doing it. Drake's group, they had like 3 Númenorian or Dunedain in the group, so and you two were in that, right? So it's like she kept jumping from person to person, and you didn't know who was the enemy, and you were behind. So it was just going around and around and around. So the girl I was running, they stopped it, but because she was possessing the body of the person they were trying to save, they didn't want to attack her, right? They subdued her. They're like, now get out of here. Let her. And she's like, I can't. I've got to go save my love, who's a prisoner of Sauron. I cannot do this. And they're like, and so she explained her whole story, and they took pity on her and swore an oath that they would continue her quest to try to find this elf and free him if he's still alive. And they swore a solid oath. And we know how Tolkien is about oaths. If you look at the oath breakers and the people of Eric and the paths of the dead, you swear an oath that's really binding. So that's what the group last year did. And it's like, so that means next year they have to go to Mordor. So we started with that. That's how we ended up here. So this is the first time we've connected the story from last year to this year. So now, like the slowest campaign in the world. But we're now continuing that. Many of you were not there last year, so you've had to just be brought up to speed and just, suspension of disbelief. Like, just go ahead and accept that that's what you did.
So does one simply vacation?
Until it awakens. So
Mordor is coming.
yes. So that was in 2949. Now, Michael, I revealed a few things to you that we have to be careful not to reveal to them because that won't happen until their third session. But
there will be no time travel.
Right. So, but you know the context that I'm referring to. It is now 2951 early spring. You were able to find a map of Mordor. You found a spy in the midst of Minas Tirith who had been feeding info back into Mordor.
Do you mean to say that winter is coming?
So I think Sauron was more on the fire side of that icy fire battle. Yeah. Yeah, shadows and fire. So, and then you guys are trying to get into Mordor, and that's the initial that first session. You have 3 major sessions today. So the next session is crossing that boundary, and then hopefully, finding your goal, and then hopefully, if you do find your goal, trying to get out of Mordor. So at this time period, as we were talking a little bit earlier about the stewards, the current ruler of Gondor is the steward Turgon. He's 96 years old. According to the Tale of Years, he'll live to be 98. And it has been peaceful under his watch. Really, not a whole lot has happened. And in your adventure, it took the Lord Urbanane to get permission to go into Mordor. Was not an easy thing to do. It took like over a year convincing how worthwhile purpose this would be.
Why should you focus speaking dragon?
Right, that's what he was afraid of. I'm like, hey, it's quiet. Let's not do it. And then worse yet, so they said, okay, let's send some scouts out and see what it's like. So the scouts went out, and they came back the next year. You guys all came back next year, and he's like, it's quiet, too quiet. Normally, when the scouts go out, they would see the occasional orc raiding party or some Easterling or Haradrim southbound caravan, something like that. No, the scouts didn't find the slightest movement anywhere throughout the boundaries of the world. Just complete silence, not a sign anywhere, which made Turgon even more anxious. But you guys are like, well, great, let's go. Let's go while it's quiet. And so that's where you started at the crossroads of Ithilien, where you could see the Morgul Vale in the distance, and then you guys had a decision to make. And so I'm curious, because I haven't been able to hear every group, and I guess I can ask the game masters. Well, Drake's not here. Why does he?
Is it still at the front door?
I guess. I think you're each members from different groups. So for your group, what did you guys choose as far as the path you wanted to take to try to get into Mordor?
Passiporos. I think everybody chose the same.
Everybody chose the Passiporos. And why did you choose that?
Well, my feeling was, when I first look at the map, that's a unused path. And, no, wait, that's not a path, that's a river. And then I debated from my memory. But my first instinct is to go that way because it's not the Black Gate, which you know what the Black Gate is. Venus Morgul is occupied.
So some of the others, what helped you? Because you had a couple. What were some of the choices? Were the Black Gate?
I wanted to give the spy the opportunity to steer us right.
Okay.
To redeem himself by steering this right, and I had a good feeling about his truthfulness, and said, if that's the best way in, then that's the way we got to go.
Okay. So you took the spy at his word. Okay. So everybody took Jacob. You guys chose the same thing, the Passiporos.
Yep.
Okay. Now, Michael, I gave you a quick heads up that there's limited information about it, but where it came up, and this was thanks to Brian's research. In fact, why don't you talk about it? The map that you came across.
Well, it was Christopher Tolkien's map. It's not the general map of Middle-earth, but specifically the one of Gondor. I think it's in, at least it's in my set of the Return of the King, and the map shows the White Mountains in clear relief. There we go. I showed up to his.
I will, and then we'll actually show it.
So there's a when you look at Christopher Tolkien's map of Rohan, Gondor, and Mordor, where they kind of intersect in that general area with the river Anduin, the great river going down there. You can see where the pass goes through the Morgul Vale. You can see where the Black Gate, Morannon, near the Daggerlad Plain. But then when you look at south Ithilien, and you look along the Ethelduath, the Mountains of Shadow, it just seems like there is a low point, because he used topographic lines, and it seemed like it would be logical where the river of Poros, which is, there's not a lot on it, might be another good idea.
I actually have a map.
Okay, good.
Excellent.
And
So
you'll
a little
hold that up to that
speculative.
camera. Thank you.
So it's a little bit speculative, but just giving another option.
But with the topo, it
Oh,
really
shoot, I can't
made
even
look
tell.
a viable. Oh, good. There you go. Michael, you get to show the magic there.
Thank you.
So here is the crossings of Poros. Now there is some history here. With the crossings of Poros, there was a battle with the Haradrim that were coming up from the south and such, and they had a big battle there and fought them off. It was some chieftain shape, whatever,
Yeah.
and it was a pretty bloody battle. And so that is actually a historical point.
Yeah, and actually the Rohirrim were engaged in that battle also and lost.
Oh, really? I
Yeah,
missed
they
that.
were. They were called as an ally of
That's
Gondor.
quite a ride.
It is.
Because up here is Minas Tirith, and clear over there is Rohan.
Yeah, and I
And they
believe
came all the way down.
I can't remember whether it was a king or if it was some of the princes of Rohan, but some of them,
Two sons, two of his sons.
two of his sons died at that battle.
Right. Yeah. There were a lot of losses on both sides. It was a very, very bloody battle. But if you look at that topo, you can really see. Oh, yeah. Can you pull that back up again?
Yeah.
Thank you, Michael.
It's really nice map.
Find that.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's Christopher. Christopher did a lot of the maps for this following. Okay, so if you look at the topography there, so each line represents how steep the elevation. Somebody may not be familiar with topography. So if you go hiking and stuff, it's critical. If the line's really close together, it means it's very steep. If they're spread far apart, it means it's more gradual slope. And so you see most of it's pretty steep up, it's like cliffs. But right here, it really kind of flattens out. There's the river headwaters, but it's only, you could actually get around it. There's only one topo line. I mean, that is a pass. I mean, it's a more,
Compare that to
up here where
here's,
it's steeper. It's still quite, you get Cirith Ungol and the Morgul Vale, much steeper.
In Peter Jackson's work, when Frodo's going up the stair, that's the Witch King can only get one column of troops.
Right, yeah, because it's so steep. So this is where we added, this is where, there isn't a whole lot. We got a little bit of info. It looks viable, so we kind of fleshed out a little bit there. We assumed that, like the other locations, prior to 1636, the plague of 1636, that Gondor had watchtowers facing inward and barriers facing inward, gates, walls, etc., to keep the forces of Mordor from coming into Gondor, rather than the other way around. And because Tolkien describes that time and time again, that it looks like they're keeping people in rather than out. And so we did the same thing where you guys come across the watchtower, but it's kind of facing into Mordor more than out towards Gondor. It's been modified and such. And you'll see more architecture like that.
Cirith Ungol up
Right.
there. Yeah.
Right. But it's nice when you find enough that it's real, that's there, it's canon, that it's there, but it hasn't been fleshed out, and then that's where we get to do the other hands and minds and build.
If that was another Memorian guard tower,
Gondorian, not Memorian, but
Gondor,
yeah.
would that be the Tower of the Sunset?
No, it's just the Watchtower Poros Pass. It's just we didn't make it.
Well, I mean,
I think Minas Tirith was originally called Tower of the Sunset, wasn't it?
Minas Tirith.
Minas Tirith, yeah.
Whereas,
You could call it, you could call whatever they're, like Barrett, Horus, or Minas Horus, or
Right.
there's a word for the root of a faithful. You could call it Minas Faithful Horus, something like that. And I get that word Eiphel from Silmarillion,
Right.
because they had a fortress on the edge of Hithlum called Eiphel Syria. That was where the Syrian River came out of the mountains.
Oh.
And it was the
Right.
wellspring of Syria.
very good.
Okay.
That's probably what
I could be using my place names, okay? So I'm not 100% positive it was the Syrian River, but it was Eiphel something.
Right.
So if you're wrong, we get to, invite you to a stakeout. I mean,
No, I think that means that he gets to read to us some of his work. That's what I meant.
That's a reward, not a punishment.
That's what I meant. We get a reward. By the way, we just off the side quick side note. And the month before, in May when you were not there, Hawk, we actually read from was it from Visualizing Middle Earth, I think, and the last it was the other one, the big book, I think.
Oh, Parma Endorion?
Maybe it is Visualizing.
Or Understanding More.
It's the essay. Maybe it's an understanding one. That's the one where it's the Witch King.
Those seats hold.
Witch King versus Snoopy. Snoopy versus the Nazgul, Lord of the Nazgul. Yeah. Michael.
Snoopy.
Do you remember that essay you wrote?
Oh, I remember the title. Yeah, I was probably sick that week. Right? Serious.
It's quite funny, actually. Yeah, it was a great mashup about the Red Baron and Snoopy going up against the Lord of the Nazgul.
I'm surprised anybody remembers that.
Well, it was at a society meeting 2 months ago, because we've now added your essays, so we read from Tolkien's letters and we add your essays to each of our meetings typically. So and then discuss them.
Yeah, usually more serious ones, but we needed a little break that time.
But wait till you get to the one where I keep Frodo being with the Hobbit Mafia.
Nice.
So you find here's the river and the Ea Tolkien, there it is. That's at the headwaters.
I'm ready.
And actually, if you can keep it up for a second, can you just show us with your arrow where would so Sauron's boss, so to speak, Morgoth, an early version of Mordor was Angband, correct? And that would have been up in the north.
That was the name.
Yeah, what Angband, I wouldn't call Angband an early version of Mordor, but Angband was like a western fortress. The original fortress, the huge original fortress, was called Utumnu, and it was way to the east somewhere. And they destroyed that. The Valar destroyed that when they took Morgoth prisoner to protect the elves. And so when he came back, he took over Angband, which had been originally Sauron's fortress, I think. Don't hold me to that. But it would, right about where I'm hovering the cursor is where it would have been. It's not supposed to be on this map, but it's on that territory covered right about there. There was 3 peaks, and I'm holding up 3 fingers, you can't see that in the link. Anyway, so it was not really what you would call the original Mordor. That would have been way to the east.
That's the old map of Maryland before it fell into the
Right.
sea, isn't it?
Very important under.
Yes.
So
Yeah, so then Sauron eventually took over this area, Dorthonia. And
Gorgoroth, and we have Gorgoroth back in the high plains of Gorgoroth as well.
and it's not on here. There was a tower up here somewhere. I don't remember if I think they were all destroyed. Sauron, I think this right here is
yep,
the Isle of
Tol Brandir, or no? There was an island. Yeah, there was a tower there.
I don't know if there was named up there. I don't remember. But the tower that Sauron was in, the Baron and Luthien story, was here on this island. I don't know how well that comes across, but that was called the Isle of Weirwolves. I don't remember the original. Maybe that.
That's like
Tolsterion?
in spitting
Yeah,
distance.
Tol Sirion. That's it.
That's like in spitting distance of Gondor.
Yeah, but unknown.
Yeah, well, those mountains would be very high.
So would you say, in terms of Mordor, going back to Mordor and how Mordor functions for Sauron, I mean, how does that compare to Dorthonion or to Angband? In the sense that is Mordor kind of an original, very different kind of setting, or is it once again kind of like these older haunts and habitations, just a place to dominate the surrounding area, or is it more like a fence that you can hide behind in Mordor?
Well, it was probably all of those and more. You have to look at it as kind of a giant factory fortress that had to support itself. They had slaves with farms south of Mount Doom, and they had armies marching all over it. Barad-dûr was huge. It was a fortress covering a mountain or built into a mountain, and just it would take a lot of resources to support that. So I don't think you should think. I think what Tolkien had in mind was a sort of industrial-like organization to that society. I don't want to call it an industrial realm, but you get a hint when Sam and Frodo go into Mordor and they mix it with all the orcs. They're very well organized, despite the fact that they're all kind of grumbling and hard to get along with. They're very disciplined. And one of the orc sergeants asks them for what their numbers are, which is, I think, a direct reference to World War I, because I think that was when the British Army introduced, no, they had serial numbers before that. At any rate, there was a lot going on in Mordor that wasn't relevant to the details of any of the major stories. The Tolkien gives hints here and there to a lot of this stuff. So I think it's best to think of it as a very complex society with a lot of resources. The fact that one upper section was, the ashy plain, don't let that give the impression that the whole place was just a barren desert-like.
Right. Well, the southern Nirnan area, that was the breadbasket for Mordor.
Yeah.
You could say it was a forward base with 2,000 years of add-ons.
Pretty much. That'd be a good way to describe it. So, I mean, how much of that Tolkien would have compared to, say, Angband or the Isle of Werewolves or something like that? I don't know. I mean, the original stories, the Book of Lost Tales, before the Silmarillion, those were influenced by his World War I experiences. And some people speculate that he was going through a cathartic process, possibly dealing with post-traumatic stress disorder. That was before they recognized it as we recognize it today. And he was probably emotionally investing a lot of his memories into the details of those stories. So you had mechanical dragons made out of metal, and Balrogs were not demons, they were shock troops. There were like 1,000 of them, so there was a whole battalion of these massive, deadly creatures, and everything in the original stories was more about war, betrayal, hopelessness. Just everything failed in the original stories. And eventually, when he came around to rewrite them as a Silmarillion, then he started to put more hopeful elements into the tales. And so that dark stuff kind of fades to the background. So by the time you get to the Lord of the Rings, he's again living through a major war. It's a very dark period. And a lot of it was written from like 1940 to 1942, I think. So there's still dark stuff there, but you have more symbols of hope and looking to the future, like the Vial of Galadriel, which Frodo and Sam take with them into Mordor, and they're surrounded by all this evil chaos and stuff, and the light of the star of Arendelle comes down and shines through the vial and helps them, in a couple of desperate situations. So I think that you have to look at Mordor as kind of, like you said, a forward base with thousands of years of upgrades. But so is all the middle. It's also been upgraded thousands of years, and many rewrites.
Yeah, and some of those upgrades and rewrites sank entire small portions of the continent into the sea. So, back
we did a remodeling.
Yeah. Massive. So, where we are now is in 2961, Third Age. And these, part of the reason why we're here is the One Ring role-playing game. What's that?
51? 61.
51. Oh.
51.
51, sorry. Yeah, so 2949 to 2951. Sorry, thank you. And it's been quiet. It's been relatively peaceful. You know, there was stuff brewing in Southern Mirkwood, but the White Council came through there and shooed away the necromancer and kind of calmed down. He's had little orcs party or raiding parties here and there, but no sign of any big.
And nothing worse than a couple frat boys.
But this is all between the events of The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings. The Cubicle 7 chose to use that whole time period for all of their games, and they're slowly progressing through the years. It's a pretty good sized gap, but there's a lot building up to what happens in the 2 years of The Lord of the Rings. 3018, 3019, is that right?
It starts at 38. Well, no, that's not correct.
Well, no, because you have Bilbo's birthday.
Starts,
Yeah, you have Bilbo's birthday, and
but the War of the Rings started in 3018.
right. I mean, is it 17 years past lazily in the Shire from when Gandalf heads off to go investigate the ring? Not 17 days. It's Peter Jackson's. Yeah, we won't. Okay, we won't go there. Sorry.
Actually, I was watching a series of YouTube videos about why the Hobbit sucked. Okay. He was poking at bottles. One of the things was he was thinking, well, okay, he knows Bilbo has the ring. So he was saying, so apparently Peter Jackson's intention was that Gandalf would think that it was maybe Durin's ring. Or the ruler of Eldor's ring, the Lonely Mountain. But it falls apart because of the way Peter Jackson structured the movies to get 3 movies out of The Hobbit.
So, on our theme for Mordor, Michael, do you have some comments on that specific theme that you wanted to bring up?
Exactly. I don't know. I think you picked an interesting time frame. Tolkien doesn't really write about what happens before Sauron, openly. I guess 2951 he would be there, wouldn't he? Because he went directly from Dol Guldur to Mordor.
Right.
So
Barad-dûr is not yet. There is no construction yet happening on Barad-dûr, but it's about to pretty soon. But there is no current rebuilding of Barad-dûr.
Well, didn't he just use the power of the ring to instantly make it
No.
instead of having
No, he describes that orcs and slaves and people are brought in to start rebuilding the foundation.
That would also explain why you don't see Sauron really marshaling forces to go on, a large-scale attack until 60 years later, because he wants to do it from the position of greatest strength possible.
Right.
Also, what's interesting is when you go to for example, in the Lord of the Rings, you're reading in the first book in the Fellowship about the Council of Elrond, and why is it that Gandalf says, our worst fears, and we realize that Sauron indeed has been gathering his strength in Mordor, and I thought that was kind of an odd comment considering the fact that in the Tale of Years, Tolkien says that Sauron declares himself way before that in Mordor. So I wasn't sure if Gandalf was referring there to just the fact that maybe people in the Shire or some of the people who were not in the knowledge, it didn't really affect them until now suddenly it did. I'm not sure.
I think you have to get into the psychology of characters, minor background characters to really decipher what Tolkien was trying to do, because the Necromancer was a pretty big evil. The way he's described, everybody has heard about him. Nobody wants to mess with him, but he apparently doesn't daunt Western strategic thinking, I guess you could say, the way the name of Sauron does. Same guy, different names. They just didn't know that he was Sauron. They thought he was some lesser servant, one of the Nazgûl probably.
Well, that would that kind of imply that he was using different tactics to hide his identity?
Well, yeah, he was definitely hiding his identity. That's why he withdrew the first time Gandalf went to Dol Guldur to try and investigate who was there. I'm going to say it was sometime around 2060, and that's when the Watchful Peace began. So when Sauron returned, nobody really knew who he was. They just knew him as the Necromancer. He had lots of armies. The Western nations didn't want to go mess with him, and they gradually got weaker. He got gradually stronger. And in the notes, in the appendix, I think Tolkien says that the White Council didn't really defeat him. He just decided it was time to go home to Mordor.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
so
he fled before their wrath. He didn't actually fight.
So I imagine, the way Peter Jackson portrayed that in the Hobbit movie, I thought was kind of scaled down. And there are good budgetary reasons to do that. But when I read the original notes, the stories and all that, I imagined that there was more of a larger conflict involved. And that's the way I would have tried to portray it if I'd been in a position to do anything like that.
Well, one of the key things in doing the research last year was that they tore open the foundations of the prisons, and, things like that. But creatures that had succumbed to the darkness quailed versus those, others who had been prisoners, against, were relieved to finally see the be pulled out of that darkness and such.
That's not something to do with
But-
live machinery.
But again, but it sounded like from everything that he left, Sauron himself left before they even really did the attack. Like he saw them coming, and he up and got them, his core retinue out of there, but left a strong force of trouble and spells and whatever magic and all that behind to put up a fight, but no match without him there to exert his will and contribute. And so he wouldn't give away that it was him. Yeah, because he wasn't ready. He wasn't full strength. So he didn't feel ready.
Yeah, but by that time, the White Council knew it was him. Gandalf discovered who he was in
That was
the previous century, 28. When he found Thrawn Ring, that's when.
Power.
Is that more than one fuse that time?
Can you hear us, Michael?
Well, there's a light on in this other room. So it's
Yeah,
only
hang on.
one fuse.
Yeah, we just lost one of the breakers.
been having problems with all the air conditioners blowing all my breakers with everything.
We can carry
I'm
on.
gonna
While
go
you're
get the
going.
breaker. Yeah. You guys keep talking. Hang in there, Michael. I believe we are because the cable is on battery backup.
Yeah.
Oh, that's Drake resetting it. I'm gonna turn this on. What triggered that?
Okay, while you're fixing it, I'll try to increase the sound a little bit here.
No, just hang on. I just turn the TV back on. But otherwise, it'll
Oh, that was fast.
be too loud. We'll Drake reset it.
I guess that's why it's upstairs.
We're wet up there. So.
Okay.
And so they knew for, I'm going to say 90 years. Now, why they didn't make a big announcement on it, Tolkien, I guess, couldn't make a story out of that.
Isn't that also when Gandalf had asked Saruman, and it was, and Saruman had said, "Oh well, no, kind of put it off a bit."
He was sabotaging the process.
So
Yeah, that's true, yeah.
There was a meeting of the White Council before they drove him out, but Saruman had convinced them that he was not a major player, or that he was
right,
not
Sauron talked him out of it. Yeah.
because at the time I think the notes were something along the lines of that he was searching for the ring and he didn't want their proximity to kind of interfere with that.
Right.
Yeah. So, and that's one of the reasons why I think they went into Southern Mirkwood with a strong force. It wasn't just, the council members. Because I think that if you'd taken an army of elves across the river, that would have disrupted Sauron's search for the ring. Whereas a small number of people, let's say all 5 wizards, let's not get into whether the wizards were there or not. But, you know, let's say all 5 wizards and Círdan and Elrond and Galadriel and you know maybe 4 or 5 others. You know, if they were all just barging across the river, that's not a very large group, and I don't see that they would necessarily disrupt Sauron's attempt to find the ring in the river. You know, I would consider that unlikely that they would notice anything. Tolkien, having traveled a bit and participated in a wartime situation, would know that it would take a lot of people to cover a lot of territory and notice stuff that was going on. So I think that that first assault on Dol Guldur was probably similar to the one that Celeborn led at the end of the War of the Ring.
And I suppose too, you have to have that kind of number to despoil the dungeons. I mean, if you're really going to throw open the dungeons, you're going to need to have a larger number.
Yeah, you're not doing that with a few boards and crap.
And that's one thing that they didn't have with Barad-dûr, that when it had been knocked down in the Great War, they never destroyed its foundations, did they? They destroyed the tower.
The foundation. Elrond specifically said the foundations were not destroyed.
Right, right. Yeah, Skype won't let me get the video back on for that camera while it's running. I'd have to hang up to do that.
Don't worry about it, Bob.
Okay.
I can see you just fine on YouTube.
Okay. Well, that's good that that kept running.
You want to read notes? Or do you
Um,
I mean, not notes, the next letter of Tolkien.
well, let's see. Okay,
Is it enough for a specific note that you still with Mordor?
Not necessarily.
No, I looked through, there
So
weren't
the next
any
one is
there.
on maps, and on
Yeah.
Tolkien's maps.
Well, and again, talking about maps, because Christopher Tolkien's not, really
I
inspired
think it's right.
that route.
Sure.
Any questions here in the audience about this before we start going on to other topics?
Participation.
Yes, please.
My name's Anthony.
Hi, Anthony. Thanks.
Did Mordor exist before Sauron came there? Did he create it himself? How did Mordor come into being?
Great question.
Michael, do you have a comment? How did Mordor?
The territory would have been there. Whether it would have been in the same condition as described at the end of the War of the Ring, I don't know. I mean, that's something that's open to everybody's speculation.
So we know that back with Morgoth, they talk about how he rose up the mountains higher and higher to create the boundaries and such. And I may be misremembering, but I seem to recall something similar with the Ethel Duoth and such, with the Mountains of Shadow, that Sauron built them up over time when he. I could be misremembering that and conflating it, but I seem to recall some passage to that effect.
Well, I don't recall off the top of my head, but if there were such a passage, it would be in one of the early drafts probably, and you have to be careful.
Yeah.
If Tolkien took something out of the story,
Sure.
then you have to treat it as something that didn't happen.
Right.
My instincts are telling me that he would have set up Mordor after Isildur lost the ring in the river to look for it.
No, he said he established himself in Mordor around the year 1000 in the Second Age.
Lord of the West.
But they don't. Tolkien doesn't describe the terrain. Yeah, I mean, like Mount Doom, was it already there, or did he raise the volcano? So
He raised it from a baby volcano.
And were there humans there? I mean, how long did it take for the orcs to become established?
There's a reference, I believe, to the people of Nuren being there before they were made slaves. That I think so. I think that some of that was they were subjugated. So at least in the southern reaches, they may have been there beforehand. But I'm not sure where that is.
It's interesting that you bring that up. I'll have to look at it because Yeah, I accept questions on the Middle Earth blog. That's how I get the ideas for the articles I write. And I think a question that came in recently was, where did what kind of people were the slaves who were enslaved around Maryland? And that's a question that's probably going to sit in the folder for a long time because I don't know how to answer it.
I don't know. It isn't clear enough. I agree, but I think that in some ways it would make sense that if Mordor was called, it could have been called the Black Land by the elves because of Sauron, obviously, but also the fact that if there were volcanoes or if there was volcanic activity already there, that he may have seen it as a suitable place to live because of the concealing, that it would resonate with what he wanted to achieve, where it wasn't so much a fair form. Because in the Second Age, he first appeared as Anatar and was trying to deceive the Númenóreans, but then when he lost that body, then he no longer had a beautiful form. So now maybe he saw himself more, rather than trying to pass himself off as this being of power and goodness, or able to help them with craft, etc., etc. I mean, because you think about it, he was able to deceive Celebrimbor and all the other elven smiths, as they were making the great rings. So there's that too, and I wonder if at that time was he already in Mordor when he was making the, yes, because he actually forged the One Ring in Mount Doom itself, right? So he's already in Mordor at that point.
Yeah, he contacted the elves, I think, around after 1200. 1200 was when the Númenóreans began building fortresses in Middle Earth, I think. I would have to look up the chronology, but I believe he settled in Mordor first, and then he began to influence the elves directly. And
so Mordor must not have had the reputation that it did later, because otherwise, some shady dude comes pops up from Mordor and says, "Let me help you make some great rings." It seems like they still have this sense of, oh, he could help us to achieve greatness, like the Noldor of old,
And, well, they may not have named the land Mordor at the time. I'm not sure we know when Tolkien said that the name Mordor was first applied to that. When Sauron was revealed, I guess that's when the elves would first be aware of the significance of that region.
Yeah.
Are you holding that up to me? Hawk?
What? Hawk's not in here.
Who's in the back there?
I can't see it.
Oh no.
It's very tiny on YouTube.
That makes sense. And so Orodruin, Mount Doom also helps in that he has a ready-made, there's a place, the Samath Naur, he's able to forge the One Ring and thereby dominate all of them.
The swamp that Gollum and Frodo and Bilbo, or not Bilbo, but Samwise traveled through,
Dead Marshes.
the Dead Marshes, what battle was that from?
That was from one of the assaults on Mordor by the last alliance of elves and men. And that battle is described in Unfinished Tales. That's where Thranduil's father charged, led his army in, and he was supported by the elves of Lothlórien. It was called Laurel and Dorian at the time, I don't know, but that's where the oddly named Amroth's father, it was either Malvadil or I forget what the other name was, but so the Sylvan elves basically led that attack. A lot of them were slaughtered, and the rest of the army had to go in and kind of like rescue them, overwhelm Sauron's forces. And the marshes grew up later. They were not there originally. The marshes came on, I guess, during the Third Age.
A blighted place.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
The Book of Lost Tales.
Okay. Michael, do you have any recent projects or anything you've been working on lately? Or let's do a little sales pitch here on some of your latest Tolkienology. If you have any.
I'm lucky to be able to get the blog. That's big. I've been working all this year. I'm doing a massive conversion project on over 100 websites, and so I'm not going to have much time to do much of anything this year. So
sorry to hear that, but hopefully you'll get another lull where you can crank out another book.
Recreational writing.
Michael, have you had a chance to have a look at Baron and Luthien that just came out?
Well, no, I haven't bought it. I kind of passed because when I read the first reviews from Tolkien scholars, they were all basically saying this is all material we've already seen.
Right.
With some comments from Christopher Tolkien.
Right.
To be honest, after 30 some odd years of reading comments from Christopher Tolkien, I think I've kind of read it all. So,
Yeah, it didn't have as much original content as Children of Hurin did.
yeah.
I'm still hoping, but it's probably very unlikely now that any notes that there might have been that J.R.R. Tolkien had on the Fall of Gondolin, if there were different versions or whatever, that'd be great to have. Just because that's another epic story, but I don't think it's going to happen.
I think everything with the linguistic material has been published now. And probably most of the linguistic material has been published because about, I'm going to say 17 years ago, maybe 20 years ago, Wayne Hammond told me that the bulk of the linguistic material has not yet been published. And that was given over to Carl Hofstetter and Patrick Wynne and those guys. And so, they've had two decades to bring all that out. And I don't know how much more they have left to go through. I think they're down to scraps at this point.
I was quickly looking for the passage when about the dead marshes when you were asking about that.
Elrond mentions it in the Council of Elrond.
Right. Excuse me. Along the sea, Aragorn pursuing. This is in Book 2. The ring goes south. Aragorn's talking about his pursuit of Gollum, and when the man must needs walk in sight of the Black Gate, or tread the deadly flowers of Morgul Vale. So all of you adventuring, heed these words. Then perils he will have. I too despaired at last, and I began my homeward journey, and then by fortune I came suddenly on what I sought, the marks of soft feet beside a muddy pool. But now the trail was fresh and swift, and it led not to Mordor, but away. So he pursued Gollum in, lost the trail, and as he came back, he came across Gollum's tracks leaving. Along the skirts of the dead marshes I followed it, and then I had him, lurking by a stagnant mere, peering in the water as the dark eve fell. I caught him, Gollum. He was covered with green slime. Nothing more did I ever get from his mouth than the marks of his teeth. I deemed it the worst part of all my journey, the road back, watching him day and night, making him walk before me with a halter on his neck, gagged until he was tamed by lack of drink and food, driving him ever towards Mirkwood. I brought him there at last and gave him to the elves, for we agreed that this should be done, and I was glad to be rid of his company, for he stank. For my part, I hope never to look upon him again. But Gandalf came and endured long speech with him. He switches to Gandalf. And by the way, if you want to see that snippet, there's a fan film called The Hunt for Gollum. Is it 30 minutes, 45 minutes, something like that? But they show that whole part with Aragorn and Gollum going through that, what was just described there, a nice little fan film. That and Aragorn's parents, Word of Hope, yes, that was the other one. Those are two fan films that came out roughly similar style and time period, building on those other prequels and tidbits in between. So anyway, yeah, there's multiple references in the Dead Marshes, and somewhere in there it does describe how they formed, and Peter Jackson talks about it a little bit in the movies.
Actually, you heard it.
What's that?
I'm remembering Frodo and Samwise going south to go through the Black Gate and avoid the marshes.
Well, they went right through them. Yeah. Yeah. But so yeah, all of the paths mentioned are fraught with peril, and then the other ways are really, really long ways. But we did, if you guys had wanted to go all the way around, up around north and through the Ash and come in from the north side, that was an option. Or if you want to go all the way down south to the hot sunlands and through the Uradran and up from the south and into Nirnen and the Sea of Nirn, that was also an option.
I think we should
took months.
I think we should just grab Frodo and hail a couple of eagles. Taxi.
Someone could have too. Yes, he's referencing that cartoon, How the Lord of the Rings Should Have Ended. And they dive bomb Frodo in with the ring into the volcano, and Gollum comes out of nowhere and grabs it, falls in. Yeah, and then they fly away, and they're like, "Oh, that was easy." Like, oh, I think we walked there. Oh, and then Boromir's characters, yeah, someone could have died. So you could always check that out. It's a quick little, very quick little clip that's pretty funny.
Kind of hilarious.
It's actually also a great Silmarillion in 3 minutes.
Oh,
YouTube video.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty good too.
Oh, you've got to show everybody your shirt. For the camera's sake, I'm sure others here have seen it.
It's just the Mordor fun run. One does not.
You need to show him. Well,
You have to go over to this
you
camera.
can't see anything. Or go up there. He'll see it.
This one. If you stand right
Have
here.
you seen that shirt before?
Just look it up.
To the camera. Walk up to the camera so everybody on YouTube can see it.
Everybody on the
Which
channel.
camera is he seeing?
That
One
camera.
over that camera.
Right.
There'll be a little latency, but
Okay. And if you can see
Yeah,
it.
it's why you need to walk up to the camera.
he is.
No, he is.
There's a little
Oh no,
latency. He's
you
coming.
won't be able to see you because he was just, but you can see it me.
Oh, right.
It's just moving really slowly.
Towards the back of the room.
Yeah. So it takes.
The camera in the back.
He's walking there. He's already there.
There's a 2
Wow.
minute.
Yeah, there's latency.
It's
A little bit of
alive.
buffering. Yeah, a little bit of buffering there.
There we go.
Okay,
Okay.
you can see it.
You can probably head back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's just gonna be you standing there for
Starting to Yeah. Well, I was supposed to get one of those for all the GMs. I'm not sure what happened. Oh, they did, but I don't know. I gotta
You show up a
investigate
week
further.
late.
Yeah, it might be.
Bland shirt, so
There'll be condolences.
The other
after the
T-shirt
fact.
that's fun I got as a gift from Katie for my birthday, and that is a Seattle Mariners shirt.
Oh, right.
And then the back of it says, for the player, it says Arendelle, the Mariner.
Ea Rendell,
Arendelle.
the Seattle Mariners, and the Mariner. Ea Rendell. Yeah. Good riddance to Seattle,
I
down here
thought
in
it was
Georgia,
funny.
right? Because so Michael, when we met, he was down in Texas, and then at some point you moved up to Seattle, and then you came over here and fell in love with huckleberries, just like I did when I moved up here.
And
And a
I'm
whole-
still in love with it.
yeah, he made a whole website dedicated to them and stuff. They're awesome. And then now he's been in Georgia for quite a few years since then. Did you get to? Were you on the last DragonCon panel thing? Did you get to do that again?
Yeah, I did DragonCon last year
Okay.
before they killed the Tolkien train.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. They did. That's right. I remember you writing about that. You did write about that.
Yes,
Yep. I remember that.
on the Tolkien Society blog.
Go ahead and pitch quickly for those who want to follow you, your various places to be followed.
Well, most often I'm going to write on middleearth.zenite.org. It's XENITE, named for Xena Warrior Princess. Sometimes I write for the Tolkien Society blog. And I'm not going to mention anything else because all the other Tolkien stuff that I've tried to do through the years, I just don't have time right now to do a lot of the fan stuff. Like I said, I'm in the middle of a massive conversion project working on over 100 websites, and that's just going to take months and months and months.
Yeah, he's a search engine optimization theorist and application. And so search engine optimization is the techniques of trying to get your website to show up at the top of the list for whatever people are looking for. And he blogs about that frequently. I'm really glad you were able to make time for us, though, Michael. It's just it's really great to have you here. I appreciate it very much.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hope someday we get you back here in physical form again.
Well, we'll see.
Yeah.
We could just get you a teleporter.
So, Brian, it sounds like you wanted to go ahead and read the next letter, I think.
It's very short.
Yeah, well, it's a very short one. Do you want to read it, or you want me to? Or
It doesn't matter to me.
somebody else wants to take it? Okay, great.
Ooh, a volunteer.
There you go. Excellent. Right there. Which 41? Number 141. Yes.
Okay, so this is from a letter to Allen and Ellman, the publishers, October 9th, 1953. He says, "The maps, I'm stumped. Indeed, in a panic, they're essential and urgent, but I just cannot get them done. I have spent an enormous amount of time on them without profitable result. Lack of skill combined with being hurried. Also, the shape and proportions of the Shire, as described in the tale, cannot by me be made to fit into shape of a page, nor at that size be contrived to be informative. I feel that the maps ought to be done properly. The quote, burned manuscripts, which readers have found engaging, have disappeared, making the text of Book 2, Chapter 5 at the beginning rather absurd, and losing the runes which seem a great attraction to readers of all ages, such as are foolish enough to read this kind of thing at all. Even at a little cost, there should be picturesque maps providing more than a mere index to what is said in the text. I could do maps suitable to the text. It is the attempt to cut them down and omitting all their color, verbal and otherwise, to reduce them to black and white bareness on a scale so small that hardly any names can appear, that has stumped me."
Cool. Thank you for that.
Just for the note,
Yes.
Book 2, Chapter 5 is the bridge of Khazad-dûm. So it is, I'm assuming he's talking about the burned manuscript that there was going to be, yeah. Well, these,
Is it the book of Mozart?
yeah, exactly. Now they,
He did 3 pages from that, and I think all 3 have since been published.
Did you see recently, last year or two, that annotated map that they stumbled across of Middle-earth, where it had
Yes.
Tolkien's comments all over? And we actually used that because it ended up being out there in public domain. The library made it out, put it out there for everybody. So we used it in this adventure and kept some of the annotations there because they find it in the archives of Minas Tirith as what the players use as a map to look for clues in Mordor to try to find this prisoner. How cool is that it actually has Tolkien's annotations and such, those circles and lines and comments updating and explaining the map. And if you were in
Did you hear about the other man?
which one?
Apparently a fan, now this came up on Reddit, and I don't know if it's been confirmed or not, but apparently a fan took a map to Tolkien and that he had made of Middle-earth, and it was very decorative. And Tolkien supposedly wrote on it, "Here may be Endwives," right next to, there was the fan had put a forest next to Dorwinion. And so people were wondering, what Tolkien meant by that. And that map, I think I read an article about that somewhere. I think it was on the Tolkien Society blog. But I did not reproduce the fan-made map here. It was on Quora, not Reddit. But,
Yeah, but Reddit references it. Yeah, I see it on the site Quora, a place to share knowledge of better of the world. A user asked, "After Lord of the Rings, was there any mention of the Entwives?" Member Pip Willis responded with a story about his father, who drew his own map of Middle-earth and reportedly was able to personally show it to J.R. Tolkien in the year 1971. Willis reports that Tolkien indicated on the map where the Entwives might have settled. Anyway, at the meeting, my father asked about the Entwives, and Tolkien, taking a pencil, marked on the map, "Here be the Entwives." Later, Dad inked over the pencil marks, keeping the handwriting style, and I didn't think about much more about it until I happened to mention the map to one of my older brothers, who recalled the above anecdote and I realized how significant it may become, or not. Willis's father is still alive and living in Sussex. He took a photo of the relevant part of this map and sent it to Pip. And there it is. So it's west of Dorwinion and the Sea of Rune and south of the River Running. Here may be Entwise.
If you wait a moment, I'll try and get it on the screen.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
So, what was the question that you found?
I typed in fan map. Here may be Entwise in
Search it.
web search.
While we're looking for that, just a little note on why maps were so important to Tolkien, I think. So in England, the Ordnance Survey maps were so detailed, starting in the Victorian age, their closest up scale was 25 inches to the mile. And so the British maps were very detailed. That's just the way that they liked making them for their island and for all the details, especially showing where all the footpaths were and things like that. And so I think it makes sense that he felt it was very difficult to fit in everything in a map on a book in just black and white.
Did you find that, Mike? There we go.
Let me see if I can make it a little bit bigger.
Yeah.
I'm going to stop sharing for a moment.
Okay. He's not going to share anymore.
Yeah, he just doesn't like it.
So,
Okay. I think here it comes.
Anticipate.
Almost there.
Hey!
Okay, so there's Dorwinian's name from
Yep.
right?
Yep.
That's the Kelvin River. Sea of Rune. Here may be Entwise. This forest is not on any Tolkien map. It's not on the Powing Banks map. This is a fan map. But this is where Tolkien suggested Entwise could have settled.
Now, somebody here, was it Drake?
He's not here.
Okay, somebody a few weeks ago. Okay, so one thing we do each year at the Tolkien Society meeting is like, what is our theme for next year? Anybody have requests? Because somebody a few weeks ago had said we should go try to find the Entwise. Oh, I think it was Jacob.
It was Jacob.
Yeah, he's like, let's go find the liquid light in the north, which is the leftover from the trees or whatever, and let's go find the Entwise and like do all these impossible things as far as there's so little material to go on just to be like, because we did the theme on giants. Tolkien didn't write that much about giants. So I had to pull in. I had to pull in so many other sources to try to make that work. It worked pretty well, but it's a lot easier when Tolkien wrote about it a lot, like Mordor, hobbits, and things like that. But
Is it Tom Bombadil?
yeah. Yeah. Is that a joking question? Or, okay, well, you never know because.
Well, you know,
But
if
yeah.
Peter Jackson didn't say anything about Tom Bombadil, he obviously
So one of them is to try to find the Entwise. That was one of the suggestions for a theme. But let's throw out. Anybody have some favorite themes that you think would be a fun thing to discuss next year? So even if it's just Tolkien Society, a theme that we could research between now and then, and then of course for Tolkien Moot, the adventure we go deep into the research.
Let's visit Tom Bombadil, for real.
what about the dragons in the north?
So actually, we did do a theme on dragons years ago, and I did a 5-part module that was too long. It was. It's a campaign. You could play it. It would take you a year to finish it. Really, I way overdid it. But it's all on TolkienMoot.org. You can download the PDFs and such. We covered all the options for the dragons during the Third Age. Now, if you want to go back in the Second and First Age on the fires for Hobbit, etc., then there's all sorts of options. So we've got one for dragons of the north. We got one for Tom Bombadil. We got Entwise. What else would you guys like to throw out there? What would you like to see for a topic next year? Ents in general. We did do one that was all about trees, because I wrote an essay in which the Tolkien Society summer session they read at the UK Tolkien Society on all about Tolkien's love of trees. And so I did a whole Tolkien Moot 3-day adventure with Hjorns and Ents and everything to do with trees. And because Tolkien talked about, you know, the trees don't have anybody to defend them, so let's have the Ents help defend them because everybody else is attacking them. And so that entire adventure was about trees and Ents and Hjorns, etc.
So you're looking for an intimate.
Right. That will take a really, really long time. Hill a hasty word. Okay, so we've got Ents in general, Ent wives, Tom Bombadil, Dragons of the North. What else? Let's throw them out here.
Have you already done kind of the religion, the quasi-religions of the
No, we have not done one on the religions of Middle Earth. No, they come up in tidbits, but we have not delved.
Evidently, there's a priestesshood of Havana who handles the making of the lembas.
Lembas? Oh, that's right. Yeah, the Lembas. They said there was some sort of a ritual to that.
What about Fornost and that whole? I mean, what did you do on the Witch King and on that whole time period of Arnor breaking up into 3 kingdoms?
The 1400s. We did a whole campaign on that with the Weathertop Palantir.
Yeah.
And so when that one, we found out that Tolkien referenced how in a siege somehow they got and the Palantir Weathertop was huge. It wasn't a little hold it in your hand one. It was, if it runs you over, it will flatten you like a steamroller. It was this huge thing, like putting it in a wagon, just maxed out the wagon. They rolled it down this tower.
Get Bob from
like Marble Madness.
Got another orc stuck on the Palantir.
But he said somehow a group of heroes or whatever got during the siege were able to sneak out this huge Palantir and move it to its new location to be safe. And then Weathertop was razed to the ground. So we did that whole one as well a few years ago for that one Palantir. Now there were the 7 stones, so you know we know what the Orthanc stone. We know about the Minas Morgul stone, the Sithil stone. We know about the Minas Tirith stone, and then we know about the Weathertop stone. But what are the other 3 stones, Michael?
But you had one in Osgiliath.
You had one. Okay.
In Hellas Tyrion, in the Tower Hills. Let me count. I'm gonna use my fingers. Okay, so you got Osgiliath, Minas Anor, Minas Ithil, Orthanc, the Weathertop, Hellas Tyrion, and I'm gonna say Annuminas.
Wasn't there one in the Undying Lands that was used to communicate?
Yes, the Master Stone. It was in Tolerancia.
Right. Okay, so that's one for something on the Palantirs.
I was thinking even a little earlier with Annuminas and when because that's one little interesting thing that you kind of just read right past it. But when Aragorn is crowned, it's not only that he gets the crown, but he also gets the scepter of Annuminas.
Right.
And I think that's interesting. But that would go back to early Third Age, I suppose, when Arnor was still one kingdom and you had it being governed there. So if we want to stick within the 60 years between The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings.
Oh no, we're not limited to that. That's easiest for the tour stuff.
Sure.
So Mercon 1 was the last 2 weeks of Numenor before it went under the sea. And you had to flee, you had to escape from Numenor before it sank.
Oh,
that was fast paced.
We're making it wide open.
Yeah, and then the second one was the first year after the fall of Numenor, you came to in the prisons of Umbar.
Yeah.
That was a mistake. Michael was there for that one. Do not start with everybody in a dungeon for a convention game. I gave like 5 ways out, and it wasn't until we remember Friday, Saturday, Sunday. It wasn't until Saturday they got out of the dungeon because either they flubbed the rolls or they didn't think of the right little ways out. It's fine for a campaign. Never do that for a convention.
You just have to wait for the Emperor to stroll past, and then he lets
you know.
I think the Fall of Gondolin would be a really
Fall of Gondolin? Yeah, Gondolin.
Even though you can't change the canon, what you could do is you could have various other possibilities, like
You get to fight the Balrog.
when
One of us gets splatted.
I think the Balrog reference in Gondolin is for more like elite word writers. Is kind of the impression I got from reading that section. Wait,
What?
it was originally he had a high Balrog count. The elves were dispatching Balrogs left and right. And instead of it, I was kind of reading between the lines and thinking, well, maybe he's actually talking about like a ward writer.
I thought it was the
Well,
Lord.
they're
Lord
actually
of
three different stories.
Yeah.
One story, the original story, The Fall of Gondolin, was written for the Book of Lost Tales. And then the second story began with what Christopher Tolkien titled "A Tour and the Coming of His Coming to Gondolin," and that just ended with him going through the seven gates. The third story is what was actually published in the Silmarillion, which was I don't know what you would call it, an amalgam, I guess, of two earlier stories, plus whatever notes Christopher might have found. And so the Silmarillion story is the one most people know, but then they try to conflate it with the story in the Book of Lost Tales, which is not really a good idea for too many reasons to go into in this discussion. But I know what you're talking about. There were a lot of Balrogs in the first version, and there were probably not supposed to be that many Balrogs in the last version. But Christopher was kind of guessing at the time because this was in the years 1973 to 1977 before he actually did all the meticulous work to lay out everything. And by the time he got to the end of publishing 12 volumes of the history of Middle-earth, he repudiated a lot of his own editorial decisions in the Silmarillion.
Right.
And basically said that he did a lot of things wrong, especially when he got so far towards the end of the book, where the materials were less finished when he took them on.
Yeah. So we're going to wrap up here. So we've got a bunch of these on the floor. Any others you want to throw on the floor for ideas for a theme for next year? Anybody else?
Sorry.
Okay. So
Did you take him through the Valley of the Spiders?
Oh,
they're getting a small taste of that right now. I think they'll be sated on crunching spiders.
are you talking about Nan Dorthed by
Yeah.
Tolkien?
Yeah.
Ungoliant and her brood when they're young. Okay, so Tom Bombadil, Entwives, Ensign General, Palantir variants, Gondolin, Fall of Gondolin time period. Did I miss any? Religion, thank you. Really delving into the different Middle Earth and beyond, because it goes all beyond Numenor and the Elendili and the Morgothians and all of that. So Tolkien and religion within his setting. So I guess what we'll do is think about which one you'd like. I'll go through it again. It's not purely democratic, but I want to see if there's any flow. Yes.
Do you ever do anything from like the orc's perspective? Like good ones. That guy.
Well, okay, so there's
Game of Thrones.
there's an entire album by some heavy metal guys from the orc's perspective and those horrible, harassing elves. How they just terrorize. They're terrorists. The elves are terrorists who are subjugating all these orcish tribes to their evil fascist ways or whatever. Just like they've all. And so the entire album's in orcish. And they're like out hunting and camping, and they're just trying to fend for their tribe and feed them, and these elves keep slaughtering them. But it's all done in orcish, and then they do these heavy metal.
Morgoth is just trying to set up a decent industrial center.
Yeah, so he's just trying to bring order and peace in our time, right? So okay, so from the orc perspective,
You can. What you can do is you can look at the half orcs. Through the half orcs, there are some things that they when you look at. I'm thinking of Orthanc and Saruman, and you could have an interesting story of a character or a person who is conflicted, and sometimes we have those where you bring them into a bigger story, and it shows that sometimes.
Well,
but
like the battle at the crossroads of Ithilien with the Mumakil and such, and the Rangers, and Sam, I think it was, who's conjecturing about he had a family maybe, and now he'll never see him again, and he's looking at the body and such. So yeah, there's as Kosh on Babylon 5, truth is a three-edged sword. Their truth, your truth, and their side, your side, and the real truth, whatever that is. But okay, so let's close the floor for submissions. All right, so just to get a feel, like if there's a whole bunch of hands, that'll help us. If it's all over the place, then we'll roll a die or something. I don't know. So we have. Oh, you made the list. Why don't you go ahead, Secretary? So.
How many times can we vote? Because if there's
as much as you want.
Okay.
It's okay. It's when we want to see if there's one that really stands out.
Yeah,
You could also
Yes.
yeah.
All right. Thanks a lot, Michael. Really
Bye, Michael.
appreciate it.
Bye.
Very nice to you.
Bye.
Take care.
Okay.
all right. So how many? I'll just put a number next to these so I can keep track. How many would be interested in Find the Entwives? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 for targets. Okay. All right. How many interested in an adventure in which you visit Tom Bombadil?
I think it'd be interesting. I just don't know how you make that
You
into.
can-
We
the whole
always
hippie
figure
style
something
thing.
out. We always figure stuff out. There's all sorts of ways. There's a lot of Tom Bombadil material from all of the Tolkien reader and everything. So a lot of fun stories. So don't go kicking a troll with your foot.
Done by. Okay. Anything? Somehow getting back to dragons again, even though it has been touched on
Dragons of the
before.
North.
Something related to dragons.
I'll have to
One. Yep. Okay. Good to know. That was now we did Ents though. You did say Ents specifically recently.
Yeah, we covered Ents and trees pretty well.
That's 5
in that
years.
one. If you want to check it out.
How
And a
about
whole essay on it.
Yep.
Too, so.
how about the fall of the Elven Kingdom of Gondolin, the Secret Kingdom?
hot counts.
Nan, I put this down, but feel free to shoot it down. But it's the Valley of Spiders.
Yeah.
That's Nan
That's
Dagortha,
really
which
cool.
is yeah.
That's just going to be a crunch fest. It's just gonna be fine.
Visit the Valley of the Spiders,
Yeah, that was role play
Goliath's
there'd be
children. Anybody? Yeah, okay.
They're not that suicidal.
We like to keep our characters.
Yeah.
We're going to the valley. An hour later, we're finished.
Why is everyone wearing a red shirt?
Okay.
The touring group handed me the red shirt as I was going in.
Next one.
Need a spider grenade. Religions of Middle Earth or
Religions of
Finding.
Middle Earth. That would. There's material on that.
Okay.
That would definitely. I really do think that's a good
Did I miss any?
society discussion.
Volunteers.
Palantirs, yeah.
Something related to the Palantir, but different from the last
Right. Wouldn't be the weather top one. Be one of the others.
one. One of the other ones. Palantir.
Sure.
Anybody see
Yeah,
stone?
build on that. Sure.
Okay. All right. All right. So we'll keep that for.
Well, it really looks like
What about
Endwives.
from the
Oh, enemy's perspective.
Oh, enemy's perspective. Oh, yeah. From the orcs' perspective, or the
More
enemy's perspective.
enemies,
More DOS
Yeah.
industrial center.
yeah.
We did a little bit of that from last year, but not in depth.
So
I like
for
that.
that.
I think that's
Okay.
good.
Something from an orcish perspective.
Okay.
Kind of an interesting.
Mhm. Yeah.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
I pretty much raised my hands for all of them. Yeah, okay, yeah, cool, yeah.
So really, it's 3. It's Find the Endwives, The Fall of Gondolin, or an orcish perspective. So those are kind of
And the Endwives, I think, was almost everybody. I think we had like 2 that did. So that's what I was looking for, something that's just really like, oh yeah, that would totally be good. Now, there's nothing to say, and I've done it before, but we can't combine several of those. So, Endwives, Gondolin,
You enlist Tom
religion,
Bombadil with
Tom
you.
Bombadil.
Tom
Bombadil.
Bombadil. Yeah, we can make some whole especially if we ever go back to the 3-day mode where there's more time
And Goldberry?
to go into these things. Now the other thing is, I don't know if I'm going to do this at my house again next year. John and others, through the RPG Research Project, we're really trying to grow this. I don't really ever want to be more like 100 people, so I want to keep it kind of on the smaller side where it's cozier and we actually get to know each other. When you start getting really big, it becomes really commercial and it loses a lot of the connection. The dream is to get another opportunity at being at the Bozarth Mansion to host it. And it's about $4,500 last time we tried to do it with this thing. It's a 1912 Tudor style mansion if you haven't seen it. It's beautiful. You rent the entire property for the weekend. And there's like 45 little bunk rooms that you can stay in if you want for like $25 a night. And then the whole building and then the grounds around it are it's just beautiful. It seems like something Tolkien, because it's of his generation, it just feels so Tolkien-esque. And it's just right up the street from here. It's very close.
That's almost a 2 years out thing where we need to get enough people.
Well, and to book it is about 2 years out.
To book it and enough people who are really interested in it.
Yeah.
You know, it's if we want it, then it's a possibility, but it needs Hawk can't pull this by himself. He needs people to be really interested enough that you'd be willing to say, yeah, I'm going to put that on my calendar. I'm willing to help volunteer. Blah blah blah.
I also feel like that's the kind of thing that you'd want to charge admission for.
Yeah.
Because if it's $4,500,
can't do it. The moment we get into that, we got to do licensing, and then it becomes hundreds of thousands of dollars.
I thought that at one point you were considering doing food charging.
That's what we were considering, and what we did instead, we just took big donations, and everybody donated.
What about?
That's what we were doing. Michael gave $500. I gave $1,000, and we were just trying to cover it. The problem is Tolkien Enterprises, not the estate. Tolkien Enterprises, the Salazance company, Middle Enterprises now. It's all about licensing and lawsuits for them. That's how they make their money. And if we do this for free, that makes it pretty easy. I mean, they can technically still harass, but it's hard to show any harm. And because we have the literary aspect, that also helps. The moment you start charging for that intellectual property, and if it gets any publicity at all, I mean, if you're under the radar, then who cares? But you get any publicity, that can become a problem. It's not impossible, but it's a pain in the rear. And it is something that maybe in the future. But here's the other option. We did a kind of donor way. Another way is to set up a Patreon or a GoFundMe where everybody can donate into it to cover the cost of making it happen. I think that's a great idea. It's place. And I've already done that with other things through Zombie Orchestra, and I think like $6,000 a month for the stuff, the games and such.
So a picture of those that might help.
We don't have time right now, but it is on the website. If you just type in Bozarth on Tolkien.org, you'll see a whole bunch of photos I took, and it is absolutely beautiful. So something to think about. Now, what I would like to do to wrap up is I would like to do what we do each year is try to get everybody outside quickly in front of the Tolkien Moot sign for a big group photo. And actually, I'd like to do that also in front of the trailer too, if you don't mind, because we got that going on as well. So if we just jet on, we're going to go and
need about 15 minutes for people to grab food before.
Right. So this will just take a couple of minutes.
Use the bathroom before the second session.
Yep, exactly. So this will be quick. But please, if everybody would.